So I'm going to read two excerpts from a book that I'm reading called Hair Story, Untangling the Roots of Black Hair in America by Anya D. Byrd and Lori L. Tharpe. And then I'm going to share my thoughts. Okay? Okay. The first one is and this is the one that led me to the seed of colorism, texturism, and featurism, which we will be talking about later, but I digress. Okay. White slave owners sought to pathologize African features like dark skin and kinky hair to further demoralize the slaves, especially the women. Aided by the scientific community, which had officially relegated dark-skinned, woolly-haired people to the bottom of the evolutionary ladder, the slave owners' brainwashing took root. Black women began to perceive themselves as ugly and inferior. And if you believe you're inferior, then you're much easier to control. On the part of the slave owners, this brainwashing was not accidental but deliberate. When the slave women internalized the slave owners' racist rhetoric, which was inevitable, it wasn't long before they passed the pathology on to their sons, daughters, and future generations. So we see from this passage that white enslavers intentionally, psychologically brainwash Black women, specifically Black women, into seeing themselves as ugly. Now, they intentionally set out to break the backs of Black people, metaphorically and realistically, right? But with Black women, it was different. It was to make them see themselves as ugly, as inferior to white women, and then to pass that mindset on to their children, and I think specifically onto their girls, for a reason, which we will be talking about in a later lesson. Once they were able to do that, Black women and Black girls, in theory, would be easier to control. Now, I think me, myself, and I's personal opinion, I think it was also targeted specifically toward darker skinned Black girls and Black women. We've talked about colorism, right? And I've asked the question, how many dark-skinned Black girls were told to get out of the sun so they wouldn't get any darker? Or how many Black girls in general were told to get out of the sun so they wouldn't get dark, period? Told to wear hats or use umbrellas? How many were subjected to bleaching creams? How many were told that they were ugly because they were darker? It's a seed that was planted into the minds of enslaved Black women by their enslavers, intentionally implanted. And it's a fruit that is still bearing to this day. Now, let me read to you another excerpt. Now, this is coming from the same book, okay? After slavery ended, Black people wanted to show white people that we are not inferior. We are just as good as they are. We are not lazy. We are not brutes. We are not idiots. We are human beings capable of intellect and respectability. Black people fought the negative depictions and created an image called the New Negro, a retaliation against the images and caricatures put forth by white society, and a pride in the achievements and respectability of black people. Now, while men were often the ones being hailed as the leaders of the race, it was the new Negro woman who became in many ways its symbol. In cultures throughout the world, women, who are the least enfranchised in society, are commonly used to represent the norms and values of the group. Therefore, black womanhood, a construct so diminished by the essays and other abuses of slavery, was rebuilt and revered as a symbol of the civilized Negro. Booker T. Washington stated, "The African American woman can prove to the world that Negro womanhood, when properly treated and educated, will burst forth into gems of pure brilliancy unsurpassed by any other race." The black woman's look was a calling card to make people feel comfortable, a role black women play to this very day. So men, both black and white, used black women's appearances for their own purposes. One, in an attempt to poison an entire race. We ended up being the backbone of an entire race. The other put us on a pedestal and used us to show the world that black people are intelligent, respectable, and capable of achieving great things. And black women did so much more than that. We kicked off and supported the movements that gave you LGBTQ and civil rights. The Civil Rights Act of 1964? You're welcome. The Voting Rights Act of 1965. You're welcome. The end of Jim Crow, segregation, the desegregation of schools, and the turning a red state blue, and saving democracy. You're welcome. And despite the historical and present deep-seated misogynoir at the hands of both black men and white men, and everybody else, black women have excelled. Black women have been holding it down in and outside of the home. Black women have been overachieving in the classrooms. Oh yes, y'all already know. Between 2018 and 2019, black women made up 68% of associate degrees, 66% of bachelor degrees, 71% of master degrees, and 65% of doctoral, medical, and dental degrees. You're welcome. Yeah. We are also the most employed. Yeah. Black women have a higher labor force participation rate than other women. In 2019, black women's labor force participation rate was 60.5% compared to 56.8% for white women. And even in 2020, you remember that year, the year from hell, in the midst of a pandemic, our labor force participation rate was 58.8% compared to 56.2% for women overall. Yeah, and despite the fact that all y'all walk all over us and do it with a smile. Yeah, we keep holding it down for you. You're welcome.